Welcome to the Invested Teacher Podcast with Kyle Pierce, Matt Bigley, and John Orr.
Get ready to be taught as we share our successes and failures encountered during our real-life lessons, learning how to build generational wealth from the ground up.
Welcome, invested students, to another episode of the Invested Teacher Podcast.
All right there, friends. We are going to be digging in today, and we're going to be talking all about how we can turn our mortgage, our primary residence mortgage, into a tax write-off. Now, that's obviously, that's the interest. Now, if you're American and you're listening to this show, you might be saying, like, wait a second, what do you mean? Isn't your mortgage a tax write-off? And in the US, you can write off the interest on your primary residence mortgage. But here in Canada, you cannot. So once again, Canadians suffering the high tax sort of bandits of the government, the Canadian government. But today we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can do this. And one such way, you may have heard about it before. It's called the Smith maneuver. It was by Fraser Smith. He was the creator of this move, and ultimately, it's totally legal. Like, it's totally, it's totally above board, and it is, it's compliant with the CRA and the tax code and all of those details. So there's no issues there. But the real key is making sure, ultimately, at the end of the day, is that as Canadians, we need any expenses that we're paying in order for them to be a tax write-off. You need them to go into sort of a business of some type. So that could be
income.
Making money.
You got to make income.
You got to make income with it, right? So a primary residence does not generate income. Matt, you talked about it before, where our primary residence is not supposed to be looked at as an investment, although a lot of people do view it that way. It is an asset. Yes, indeed. But there are massive expenses that go along with it. So with our high taxes that we pay on income here in Canada and in all the provinces, it varies from province to province, we need to be looking at ways that we can minimize our tax burden. And looking at your own primary mortgage is one such way that we can sort of accelerate that. So we're going to talk about a couple of those strategies, including some of the moves that the Smith maneuver, you see what I just did there, what they'll offer you in order to do some tax savings. But before we get going, I want to flip it to Matt, because you and I were using a form of the Smith maneuver in our early investing journey. John, you got your hands in the air. He's like,
I don't know what it is yet. I don't know what it is. You're already jumping into like saying, what you're going to say, hey, we did this already, but I feel like I don't even know what this is. Like, listeners right now are like, I don't know what it is yet either, but they're going to start telling me benefits. Why don't you outline what it is? Like, what are you talking about?
Not a wrestling move.
Like, you're saying I'm gonna take my mortgage, and all of a sudden I have to start generating income with it. Tell me more. Give me an insight here.
Absolutely. And, Matt, why don't we start with how we were using a strategy that ultimately does the same thing. Now, the Smith maneuver is sort of a way in order to transform your mortgage interest on your primary residence into something that can be written off so that you can get a tax deduction. Let's look at an example of what that might look like and sound like for real estate investing. Matt, take us back down memory lane. How were you and I investing in our first North Shore property investment when we came together back in 2016?
Well, this is one of the hard parts about investing. It's like you need to come up with a chunk of dough. And if you're just trying to save week to week, month to month, like that is literally going to take you forever. So in our case, we turned to what was at that time and remains one of the best sources of large chunks of dough, to use the technical term, which was our home equity lines of credit. So lines of credit that were secured against our homes. Based on the equity that we had baked into our houses already. So it was, they were easy to qualify for. We'd already qualified for them. There was money sitting there,
the debt equity
waiting to be used. And to this day, like we've always been big proponents of getting lines of credit, including secured and unsecured, and HELOCs, just to have them, like just to park, just to have some money that's parked there. Maybe you never ever use it. Maybe you do use it. So even when I got my mortgage on my most recent house, I didn't get a mortgage on my most recent house. I still went and said, I want to get a HELOC on this house so that I have that money to invest should we need to. So that's how we went about it.
So what you're saying is, because that's what we did when we partnered together, and we bought our house in Comber. We used the HELOC money from my HELOC to buy that property. So are you guys saying that that's what the Smith maneuver is? It's like we've taken a chunk of money from our HELOC, which is the debt equity in our home, which is kind of accessing that equity. That's what, you're paying down your mortgage. And now all of a sudden, because that money is now investment money over here, and we're making income off that investment, are you saying it's like now I get to claim part of my mortgage payment, or is it the interest I get to claim, or both?
Yeah. And I would argue the Smith maneuver kind of takes it and it talks about essentially transforming some of the money you owe on your home into this tax-free or tax refundable interest that you're going to be spending. So yes, ultimately what you did, John, and what Matt and I did, we had this home equity line, which has to be a separate account from your mortgage.
Yeah.
So that's one key thing. And in the Smith maneuver, they talk about it. If you read the book or if you dig in, they have some courses. That is a trademarked strategy. So Fraser Smith, and there's a foundation, smithmaneuver.com. You can read all about the different maneuver or the different ways you can go about this. So we had done sort of like one possible strategy there. And really the goal is that you, again, have this separate account. It's still connected to your home. So it's still secured by your home, but now that account is like a investing account. It's like an account that you're going to use in order to generate income, like you had said earlier there, John. Now, how the Smith maneuver how they unpack it, they actually look at it in a slightly different way. The way they look at it is they say, listen, if you could take, say, $10,000, they like readvanceable mortgages. So a readvanceable mortgage is one where there's the traditional mortgage and there's a home equity line on it, but the home equity line continues to get bigger as your mortgage is paid down. Most big banks have this. I currently have one on my home. I believe you both have a variation of a readvanceable mortgage as well. And the beauty there is that if you were able to find, say, I'm going to use $10,000 as a nice number. If I could take $10,000, let's say you got a bonus from work, or let's say you sold a car, or let's say you sold an investment. Maybe you have a GIC sitting there with $10,000. What you could do is, instead of just investing that $10,000 in the GIC over here, earning, say, right now, you can potentially earn 4 or 5% with interest rates the way they are. But before you do that, you take the 10,000, you put it down on your mortgage, and then all of a sudden your home equity line grows by 10,000, and you borrow the 10,000 to then go reinvest in the GIC. Now, we can layer this even further in a second, but I want to break this down for a second in terms of what's actually happening, because your mortgage now goes down by 10,000, but your home equity line goes up by 10,000. Okay. So you paid down 10,000 on your mortgage. Now your home equity line opens more access to 10,000 new dollars, and you'll now borrow that 10,000 to put in this GIC. Now, if you look at your debt is the same, but all of a sudden now that $10,000, the interest on the $10,000 is now a tax deduction. So not the entire mortgage, right? So if it's a $200,000 mortgage, now it's a $190,000 mortgage, and I have a $10,000 hole in my home equity line. Now I can write off the interest on that $10,000, which is more money in your bank, and you still can go and buy the GIC over here. Now, there's another layer to it as well, because I think for some people, they're going to start thinking about, okay, the Smith maneuver, got it. First off, I can borrow on a home equity line of credit, a separate account that is attached to my home, which is out of the box, it is not tax deductible. The interest on your mortgage is not tax deductible. The interest on a home equity line is not tax deductible until I borrow from that specific home equity line of credit account and I put it into an investment. Now, right away, where my head goes, and I'm sure, John, yours goes here too, you go, well, wait a second. Is this something like, does the Smith maneuver work with registered accounts? So let me state what I'm saying by that, because where my head went initially when I came across the Smith maneuver was, wait a second, I could borrow money from my home equity line of credit, and then I could put it straight into my RRSP, and then I'm going to get two tax benefits. I'm going to get to convert some of my mortgage interest into a tax deduction, and I'm going to be able to take my tax deduction that I receive from the RSP contribution. But in reality, that actually is not true. Okay, in Canada, we can't expense the interest on borrowed funds to fund a registered account. So that means an RRSP, an RSP of some type, a LIRA, a tax-free savings account, like any of those government sort of created accounts, or these little places, these little buckets that have tax advantages of some type, whether it's tax sheltered, tax deferred, any of those things, we can't actually expense the interest.
I was just going to say, like, so if you think you're right, I think if, like, let's say we take that $10,000 example, and I take that 10,000 from my home equity line of credit and I put it into my RRSP, I'm immediately, upon tax return time, going to get that. Let's say you make it more concrete. I actually get the dollar, the check comes back in the mail. I get, like, it's gonna like release my taxes, and like, boom, I've got now cash in hand that it's like, technically that might even pay the interest on the loan from that. And then you're like going, okay, well, now we're going to take that and we're going to pay the interest off, or, oh no, let's put it down on the mortgage, right? Or so that's all of a sudden.
Exactly. So where my head goes on this, so right away, if so again, this particular strategy, I don't want to say maneuver, I don't want to get anyone confused out there, but this strategy of borrowing on your home equity line and then pumping it into your RSP, it's still a great strategy. It's just, it itself is not the Smith maneuver, because it doesn't convert the debt from non-tax advantage to tax advantage, right? Or non-tax deductible to tax deductible. That's what the Smith maneuver is all about. So, like, specifically, it's about taking that interest you're paying, and we do not receive any sort of tax incentive on paying that interest. We're turning it into debt that can save us in taxes. So if I borrow against home equity line and I fund my RSP, we are not doing the Smith maneuver, because we are not creating this tax refundable interest expense on my home equity line. But we are still doing something really great. What we're doing is we're funding your RSP. So if, let's say, it's $10,000, and if you are in the 30% tax bracket, you now are going to get $3,000 back, right, in the following year, or when you do your taxes. And that $3,000, like you just said, you can do one of two things. If you're a Smith maneuver person, what you might do is you might take that $3,000 and actually put it on your mortgage to open up more home equity line room. And then you might borrow from that in order to put it into an unregistered account. But here is the challenge. Let's just get this. But here is the challenge, is that if I'm borrowing money to put into a registered account, and I'm borrowing money from the same home equity line of credit to make it the interest tax deductible, I now have a paper trail issue. So you're going to want to have two different home equity lines of credit set up with your readvanceable mortgage. This is something that can be done. A lot of the banks are doing that. So you can do it if you plan on implementing both strategies. So if you want to create tax deductible interest and you also want to create like a pot that you can fund your RSP with, that's fine. Now, someone might say, well, wait a second, why even borrow then against my home equity line in order to fund my RSP? I would say don't do that either. I would say use your money coming from your paycheck and fund it into your RSP, right? Why borrow it? Where's the money from your paycheck going? Probably onto your house, right? Or onto your expenses. So why not just funnel it straight from there into your RSP, get your your refund or whatever you're going to do. What the Smith maneuver is all about is having that separate home equity line of credit account and being able to take that money to invest in unregistered accounts. So that could be an unregistered mutual fund, an unregistered account that allows you to buy index funds or in the stocks and bonds and whatever you're doing. But there's no tax advantage there on that account, but you're still going to make out because the growth of that and the cost of the interest over here that's going to be giving you continual tax refunds is going to over time outgrow if you were to use like average rates for the market. Right now, we don't recommend you being risky with it. Don't borrow from your home equity line and then go throw it on, I'm going to say Tesla, because at one point Tesla was like very up and down, and maybe it'll turn out and maybe you'll be a billionaire if you do it, but that's very risky, right? Or if you pick some sort of small cap stock or something like that, take something that's safer. Maybe it's the S&P, maybe it's, some sort of index fund like that, so that you plan to hang on to it for the long term. And you're going to have a great nest egg forming by simply converting the money that you already owed on your house in order to fund this unregistered account. You can, of course, do all kinds of other strategies with your registered accounts, but you just cannot deduct the interest. Now, there are strategies out there where you can kind of put it over here for a year and then bring it back out and then bring it over here. Like there's ways to do that, but that's a lot more, there's a lot of paper trail stuff going on there. And we would advise that you start with something that is going to work, that is clear cut, easy to follow, and that, if you ever were audited, that you're not going to put yourself in a bunch of trouble. So the maneuver is all about taking ways where you can recycle the money. And basically what you're trying to do is any opportunity, the way the Smith maneuver suggests it, is that you want to take the money and you want to put it on your mortgage first to open up room in your home equity line so that you can then borrow from there and make the interest tax deductible, while your mortgage amount, the amount owing, will ultimately stay the same. Now, they talk about all these acceleration strategies as well, where you could then, on the investment, take the proceeds of the investment and use that to start paying down your mortgage again. But ultimately, it's just this snowball that they want to try to transform as much of your primary home, your primary residence mortgage interest into tax deductible interest. That's sort of the process. And the goal is to try to snowball that as best you can. Now, we're not huge fans of RRSPs personally because we like purchasing real estate, but ultimately the same thought process is taking place when you borrow on a home equity line of credit to, say, purchase an investment property. Now that interest is tax deductible interest. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to owe as little interest on our primary residence attached to our primary residence with a traditional mortgage as possible, and owe as much, mortgage on the home equity line, if at all possible, assuming that you are taking that money and putting it into an investment that's going to at least achieve what you're paying in interest on that home equity line of credit. Now, if that's not the case, then you might want to start second guessing what it is you're investing in. And maybe, you don't necessarily want to put it into a GIC. That was an example, but you'd probably want to be putting it into something that's going to give you a better return than, say, something pretty low like a GIC or a mortgage, for example.
Now, this comes back to, a topic that's been a thread throughout all of our episodes, is this good debt idea, this good debt. So that's what you're talking about there, Kyle, and having people rethink, debt. And you're right. There's so many ways that Americans can benefit from the tax code that Canadians can't or don't. And that's a rabbit hole we'll get down. But the key to this is, I guess, is really finding a good readvanceable mortgage product. So, John, I wonder, from your experience in the mortgage world, like I've dealt with credit unions on my last couple of mortgages, and they have a really clumsy product for a readvanceable mortgage. And there's the Manulife One. I've heard from clients that like it sounds really great, and in practice, I had a client who had a really challenging time with Manulife. So I
I've heard
wonder,
that too.
is there a product that you know about or can recommend? Because that's really the key to all of this. If you have that perfect dollar for dollar exchange between the HELOC and the mortgage, and that is a beautiful thing. You can watch that really fluidly. In my case, it was like we had to reapply every time we wanted to be able to access more money for the HELOC, which was totally clumsy and full of bureaucracy. And it was a far from frictionless experience. So in my head, when I picture those dollars moving back and forth, it's I can almost have this mental image, and it gets me really excited. And then I didn't experience that. So what kind of a product have you guys seen out there, or do you know of something? Not that we're endorsing any kind of bank here in particular, but from experience, what have you seen out there?
Matt, were you saying like when you wanted to access your HELOC money, you had to apply? It wasn't like just a bank account. It didn't feel like a bank account.
So when we wanted to, if we had paid down a chunk of our mortgage and we wanted to access more HELOC money, then we had to go back through. It was a less intense procedure than like a full application, but it was still enough that it was, there was some friction there. And I think the goal here, when this is really fluid, it's an absolutely, beautiful thing. And that's what the Manulife One was supposed to suppose that it would be, that fluid dollar for dollar, between the mortgage and the HELOC. And I wonder what other products might be out there from your experience you've heard.
Yeah, I think there's lots that are seamless. And I guess it'll depend, whether, what lender a client, wants to go with. But that seamless kind of fluctuation is there. So it's like, is that something that, you're listening and you want to explore? We'd be glad to hop on a call and kind of see where you're at and what your situation looks and find that product for you. So Matt, there is those out there that are a lot more seamless than what I think what you've described. But depending on, say, there's, lenders like in our database here, on our mortgage side of things, we've got access to 40 plus lenders that have up-teen products that, we can dive into and look at to see what is the right move for you to have both of those things. Actually, a lot of them have rate discounts if you go with that double product, HELOC plus, your regular mortgage, and creating that can actually get you a better rate as well.
Yeah. And I also want to, go back as well. So, essentially every lender nowadays has some form of it. Like you had said, Matt, different lenders might have, I like the word clumsy, as you had mentioned, like some might have more of a smooth process, some might not. So a lot of the bigger banks, a lot of these primary lenders that are out there, even lenders that aren't, say, the big banks, but the MCAPs of the world and some of these other lenders that that a mortgage broker might lean on more so than, say, the traditional banks. They have these products that you could see both accounts online, and it's almost instantaneously, like when you make an extra payment, where you see that extra funds open up inside of the home equity line. So that's really awesome. And I also just want to go back too, because I don't want anyone to get stuck on, say, a home equity line having a higher interest rate than, say, a fixed mortgage. Now, you might find that to be a bit of a challenge right now. If, let's say, you're on a fixed mortgage, like I am, I have a fixed mortgage on my fixed portion, and it's locked in at a low rate. But my home equity line is floating. Like a home equity line does float. So it's prime, usually prime plus a half, sometimes prime plus one, depending. Some people get prime, even if they have a really good relationship, whatever that might be. So right now you might have actually a big gap between the amount you'd be paying in fixed interest let's say you were locked in at like 2%, and now your home equity line is say 7% or 7.5%. That's a big jump. However, you should still do the math on that, because if, let's say, it's $100,000 that we're dealing with, at the end of a year, 2% is $2,000. Okay, I got you. And now we're not assuming any compounding or anything like that. So just, keeping it simple, $2,000. 7% would be $7,000. So you still have to do some math there and go, okay, that gap might be too wide in that particular scenario if your fixed is really low and your home equity is high. But you should still do the calculation, because if you're in a 50% tax bracket, you go, okay, well, what am I saving? What am I, when I write that off, I'm writing off $3,500 of the 7,000, right? So you write off 7,000 off of your income. It's going to save you $3,500. You're still technically behind. However, what did you do with the money though? If you took the money and then invested it, you might still be ahead. So you should still do the math on it. If there's a gap, if it's a big gap, then it might be harder. But if, let's say, you're looking at, you have a fixed rate of say 4% and your home equity line is, 7%, that might still make sense depending on your tax bracket. And keeping in mind as well that eventually what's going to happen is, like, my low fixed rate, it's going to go away soon, right? Like here in Canada, typically people lock in most commonly for 5 years. You can lock in longer, but usually you have to go at a higher rate to do so, right? Because it's a longer time period and there's more unknowns. But if you have like a year left on your fixed income or on your fixed interest rate, then in a year you're refining anyway, right? Or you're renewing anyway at a higher interest rate. So that gap might only be a temporary gap. Maybe you hold off until you do that refinance or that renewal, and then you still end up wanting to do the same thing anyway, because at the end of the day, the interest rate is going to be going up. So just keep those things in mind, and don't say no to an idea until you fully explored it to see, hey, does this actually make sense? And will this actually allow me to compound and snowball this effect so that I'm not only saving my tax, but I'm also opening up our opportunities to make better investments and compound the investments as well.
Kyle, why do you think more people don't know about this? Like what's been holding people back? Like, you're making the case that, if you've got, is it because maybe people don't have this extra money to put down, like I think people are making regular deposits into investment accounts or investments outside of their RRSPs. So I'm curious, like, why, is it just education and it's the idea hasn't spread, or is it like, hey, there's some downsides to this, and a lot of people say like, hey, maybe we don't go this route.
You know what? I think, everything you said, I think it's a bit of all of those things. So I think, yes, education's key, like thinking about how uneducated we are in financial literacy. Like, we are not financially literate as a society. And that's a massive problem. Finances really scare a lot of people, right? So when they start talking about it, they start talking about budgets, they worry about whether they're saving enough. It's a lot easier for people to avoid it. And then you also have to think about, like, it does introduce complexity, and that is scary to a lot of people, right? So I'm the type of person, being the fact finder that I am, I love going down those rabbit holes. I love exploring them. I love understanding them and trying to grapple with these ideas. But for a lot of people, that's kind of a scary thought. It's a scary thing. People don't want to do things wrong. And then I'm going to also argue that there's a lot of people out there that are acting in they're supposed to be acting in the best interest of their clients, but they don't necessarily have a deep enough education or understanding themselves to be able to do so. So I'm talking about, and I'm kind of calling out a lot of financial advisors that are out there that really their main goal is just helping to make a commission off of, say, investing in some sort of fund, a mutual fund, or whatever the product is that the bank is sharing. There's really no benefit. For example, if I work at a big bank and I'm the financial advisor guy, there's really no advantage for me to spend time helping you or Matt or anyone else out there to try to take money from here to pay it off on there and borrow over here. It doesn't change my life as a financial advisor. but it does change your life as a customer. So for me, it seems like a logical strategy, but ultimately that's not what they're paid to do. When they're sitting behind the big bank desk, they're there to sell you the products from the bank. They bought the mortgage. They want you to have a home equity line of credit, but they're not really interested necessarily in trying to help you strategize how you might be able to save more income taxes. Although some who are forward thinking enough would see that, well, actually, if I open up more income for you, then you'd be able to then reinvest it. And then in turn, my bottom line would be helped out as well. So there's a lot of pieces there: education. And then, is there like a want or a will or some sort of like benefit for them? And, I think the strategy sometimes gets a little scary for some people to even think about.
Yeah. And I think it brings up that mindset idea about, borrowing money. Like we talked about that when we talked about, whole dividend paying whole life insurance, and to use on the bank on yourself, or the infinite banking concept to use, to invest and make more money. So it kind of double dipping, kind of like seems like a similar type of thing that people get hung up on, the idea of borrowing your own money. It's like, oh, wait, I could put the money on my mortgage. I could put the money just straight into an investment account, or I could put it on my mortgage, but then borrow it back to invest now, right? Like there's that whole, like, I'm borrowing my own money. I have cash right here.
Yep.
And now I have to put it here, which helps my mortgage, but now I have to borrow it back and pay interest on that, right? It's like, wait, that's more interest, even though we've kind of articulated here that it's possible that you actually, the whole point is to win out over in the end anyway. So it's like that whole mentality of like trying to like understand that you're paying interest regardless, right? It's like either I'm giving up the possibility of earning more interest or saving more on tax in this case, versus earning that investment or paying interest. Somebody's paying interest somewhere. You're losing on the possibility of gaining interest when you put it over here, or you're paying interest when you borrow it. That interest is on every dollar out there in our economy. It's just who's paying it, and whether you're earning it or whether you're paying it, it's there regardless, attached to your dollar.
Yeah. And I think you highlighted something that's a really important mindset shift, especially in this particular case. Like legitimately, if you take, let's say you save $200 a month and you put it into some investment, you put it into tax-free savings, you put an RSP, wherever you choose to put it, or you just put it in a savings account because you're just trying to save. I want, like, thinking about this, it's like people still struggle with that idea. If I took $200 to pay off my mortgage and then borrowed the $200 from the line of credit, literally the same debt is over there, but in their mind, they think they're borrowing the money. But in reality, it's like, you're not borrowing the money. Like you took this 200, you already borrowed that money. It's already all over there. All we're doing is like putting it in this door so that we can take it out of that door. And literally the balance stays the same over there. And then I can go and invest this over here and get a tax deduction there. Like there's nothing as like sort of clear cut and dry, but yet that idea, even though rationally people can say, yep, I get it, I understand it. It's like to get that mindset and get over that mindset is a really big leap. And the same thing happens when we talk about infinite banking or bank on yourself or any of these whole life strategies that we've discussed in the past. That's a really tough part too, because people could take the $200 a month and put it over here, or they could put it into a policy, grow the policy, and they can borrow back from it and still do another investment. Now you have two investments over here, but one of them, you have this hole that's there. And in their minds, they're going like, now I had to borrow my own money to do it. And it's like, no, you got two investments out of it. And that's a very, very hard thing for people to overcome. But those people, and again, we always call out people listening to this show. The people that are listening to a show like this are the people that are going to take these strategies and they're going to go, you know what? I can use this to get ahead. And that's why so few people get ahead and so many people feel like they're left behind, is because you just got to put that little extra bit of thinking in there, that little bit of mindset shifting. And really, just going and doing what you know is going to help you in the long run, which is building your net assets or your net worth, so that you have more assets growing and compounding, while your interest over here, you're getting more tax deductible interest instead of just paying off interest every year, every month, like we normally do with our primary residence.
I wonder for you guys, I guess, can you hire an advisor to help you do this? Like, I wonder if part of the reason people don't do this more is because it's not a product that's pushed by banks or financial advisors. Or, I mean, there's lots of spots here. Like, we're recording this at almost 8 p.m. This is more of like an 8 a.m. kind of a topic for me,
Yeah.
when I'm feeling a little sharper.
Going to bed
But
after
there's
this, Matt.
definitely lots of, yeah, where I'm still full of Thanksgiving dinner from yesterday. So
Yeah.
I definitely got the sleepies. But my wonder is, like, can you hire someone to help you with this? Or, like, because there's so many little spots that you can get stuck here in terms of laying this out. Like, yes, you can read the book, but I'm going to say that most of us aren't capable of, reading a book and then implementing at a high level. Like, we need more help than that. And you can't walk into your local big bank and be like, teach me how to do the Smith maneuver. Like, who can I pay? Are there people out there you can hire to do this? Or, like, what's the best way to actually feel competent in it before you try it for yourself? And as John talked about earlier, like, fear messing up tax wise, and then all of a sudden getting the CRA, like, that's for Canadians, we're kind of wusses, but that's pretty scary for most of us to have, be on the wrong side of the CRA.
Yeah, totally. And actually, there are, like, in particular, so for the Smith maneuver, they do have like a certification program. I've actually been sniffing around. I know it really, really well, but I'm like, just to have that certification is something that, that I'll probably find myself doing. Finding someone who knows about these strategies. There are people out there who know them. Finding creative people. That might be, your tax advisor, right? Or it might be your accountant. Some accountants are just, essentially not exactly there to, help you get creative with, with your thinking. So find people who can help you with that. Hey, if they want to reach out to us over at investedteacher.com, of course, we love hopping on calls with people. You'll see a call button there. You can book a call with us. We hop on calls. We love meeting people. We love growing our network, and we try to help point people in the right direction. There's so many different strategies out there. I love all the strategies we discuss here, but the reality is that different strategies make sense for different people at different points in their life. So I think that's another big thing too. It's not about necessarily going, well, the Smith maneuver is the thing I got to do. It's just knowing what are my options, finding someone who knows the landscape well enough to be able to guide you and point you in the right direction. That, I think, is one of the best things you could possibly do. You could go and you could search for someone who is, let's say, Smith maneuver certified, but that might be all they got, right? And that could be great, but they might not be seeing other areas of your life that maybe you aren't paying attention to, right? That other aspects that you're not paying attention to. So I would say looking at people who have a wider lens, who have experience in all of these various areas, so that you can get focused. One thing we've noticed with a lot of the calls we've had with invested students who have reached out to us is that they have all these ideas, but they're not sure where to start, right? So finding someone who has experience in a wide variety of these areas. Again, the Invested Teacher team here, we have quite a bit of experience in various strategies. We've implemented many different ones, and we modify the strategy based on where we are at the time and in the current economy, or the macroeconomic, sort of landscape. So reaching out to us, let's get on a call. And of course, if we need to point you in a direction, we've got quite the Rolodex of all kinds of great people out there that we can point you towards, so that you can get the help that you need to take the next step that's going to be critical in you getting to your own personal financial freedom journey down the road.
Awesome stuff. So I think, thinking about the Smith maneuver, we outlined what it is. We gave a few examples of how to apply it. We talked about some benefits. We talked about some drawbacks, some things to think about, some things to think whether it's for me, whether it's not for me. And we even, Kyle just outlined where to go to get more information and to get help on implementing that and any other strategies. So Kyle, any last thoughts you want to leave with the audience on this idea before we wrap things up?
Hey, all I say is make sure that you're looking at your finances, thinking of ways that you can win, right? Because the government's not going to come and tell you how to win. Nobody else is going to come and tell you how to win. Find ways that you can help win. You're spending money every single day. Let's try to put more money back in our pockets. Let's be smart about where that money is going and how we're deploying it. And hey, maybe the Smith maneuver is the right thing for you at this time, or maybe it's not. But look into it so that you have it in your back pocket when it is the time for you.
It's awesome. I think so much of what we talk about on this show is about thinking differently about wealth. And, a lot of this stuff is unconventional, but it takes an unconventional approach to wealth building to truly get wealthy, because we know the conventional route. We've lived it as teachers. That is going to make you fine, but it's not ultimately going to make you wealthy. And this is about wealth building. And so this is one of many, many different strategies we've talked about in the show. And what's so great is the variety of them. Obviously, different ones are going to appeal to different people. So think differently about wealth, think unconventionally, and dive deeper into any one of these strategies in the Smith maneuver. When I'm fresh on coffee tomorrow morning, I'm going to revisit this episode so I can dig a little deeper myself.
Awesome. Hey, we want to thank you, the one that's listening right now, for listening to us talk about this topic. And if you've listened before, then we want to thank you for coming back and listening again. If this is your first time, we do want to welcome you. And once you've listened to a few episodes, we want to encourage you to leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform that you are listening right now, sharing that podcast with your friends and family. It helps, spread the word about financial literacy that we're trying to convey, just like those messages the two guys just shared. So do us that favor, hit that rating review and share with your friends and family. We would very much appreciate it.
Links, resources, and transcripts from this episode can be found over on the website. That's investedteacher.com/episode 44. Again, that is investedteacher.com/episode 44.
And as always, head over to investedteacher.com and hit that call button. Hop on a discovery call. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're at, and we'll do our best to point you in the right direction as to getting you to that next step in your wealth building journey. All right, invested students, class dismissed. Just a reminder, this content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice.
Hey, just as a reminder, Matt Bigley is a licensed realtor in the province of Ontario with Deerbrook Realty. John, that's me. John Orr is a mortgage agent with Bricks Mortgage, license M23006803. And Kyle Pierce is a licensed life and accident and sickness insurance agent with the Corporate Advisors and Pan Financial team.